Sometimes inspiration strikes in the unlikeliest of places, and today I'm going to be doing a painting inspired by a recent trip to the car wash. So I was at the car wash recently with my husband, and it was one of those car washes where the car doesn't like drive through the automated car wash, but you pull in and then you have to get out and get the hose and it sprays the water and the soap and everything. So we were at this car wash. I stayed in the car and my husband was out washing the car quickly, and all of a sudden I looked up at the window. So our car has like the roof is basically a full window. And I saw this really amazing pattern. So I'll put in a photo here so you can see. But the soap and the water and the bubbles made this really cool pattern on the ceiling of the car. And so, of course, I grabbed my phone and took a bunch of pictures actually, because I knew that this was going to be something that I wanted to do some type of sketchbook, painting, or drawing of um, later. So, snap those photos, and today we're going to be doing a painting loosely inspired by the image, but I'm going to be adding some color to add more dimension. All right, so I've taped off the edges and then went ahead and added a very light wash of water onto the paper in the kind of the shape of one of those lines of bubbles in the photo. And I first added a very light wash of blue because I want to use what's called a wet on wet technique where you're adding paint pigment into a wet area on the paper. Ideally, you would do this just with water, so I would add the line with just water first and then add the blue on top. But I always have so much trouble seeing the water if I put it down as just clean water first. So I ended up adding a little bit of blue tint to the first water wash. And now you can see I've come in and I've started to add some of the darker blue to this line type shape here. So I'm doing that, and then I'm going to be adding some other colors to create kind of like a gradient going from blue to a bright yellowish color. And they mix in between. So here's the yellow. You can see I've started adding the yellow, and I'm making these colors really concentrated um, because I felt like it. I wanted some bright colors. I wanted this to be um, a bright colored piece, and I really love this like almost neon yellow and the very bright blue that we see here. So now I'm kind of mixing them together in the middle to create almost like a greenish type color. Um, and then again, some more yellow, which you can see here. And I'm basically going to be following this process for the entire painting to create that pattern or something similar to the patterns that were shown in the previous photos from the car wash. So if you're curious to know the specifics on the colors that I'm using here, they're all Holbein Artists watercolor. I'm not sure if it's Holbein or Holbein. Somebody can let me know what the right way to pronounce that is. But I'm actually using two different colors of blue here. So I start with Compose Blue W096. And then towards the middle, I add more of a turquoise blue. That color is actually called turquoise blue W299. And then for this bright yellow, it's actually a green color. It's called leaf green W277. But it does really it looks a little more yellow on the camera than it does in real life, but it is quite a yellowy green color. And I think these three mix together really nicely to create a really cool gradient. And then I do like to add like little dots of yellow in the middle just to add some interest and also kind of tie everything together. And with the wet on wet technique, those yellow dots then kind of spread out and create really cool effects. So as I've been making these YouTube videos, because I've just started this pretty recently. I think this is my fifth video that I'm making. I've been reflecting on what I like about some of the the YouTubers that I like to watch, particularly the people who do art. And I've realized that I tend to prefer videos where the person who's doing the artwork is talking for most of the time, and kind of narrating through what they're doing and also just talking about random stuff in their lives. I like to have videos on if I'm doing something like folding laundry or tidying the house. And so it's nice to be able to hear a narration of what the person's doing and then also look at the screen occasionally to see the artwork as it appears. And I'm curious if that's just me or if you feel the same way and you prefer having me narrate throughout the entire video, or if more people prefer having the music over the videos like I've done in previous videos. Um, yeah, and I'm always just so impressed when I watch some of these other YouTubers and they're able to like just so eloquently narrate everything that they're doing throughout these fairly lengthy videos, and they find, a lot of really interesting and detailed things to say about what they're doing. I think it probably will take a lot of practice to get to that level on my part, but it's just something I've been reflecting on. Okay, so as I've been talking about that, I slowed down the video here because I've started to add in some of the bubble areas. And so I'm again doing the wet on wet technique here. This is actually like a pretty light wash of water that I'm adding in, although it looks kind of dark on the screen, but it's intended to be a light wash. And then I'm laying out where all of these different like bubble shapes are going to be. And then I come in with the blue and the green color and just add it in. So yeah, you can see now I'm adding in some darker areas here. And then I'll be going in with the greenish yellow color, and tying those in as well. So yeah, here's the yellow coming in, yellow greenish color coming in, and I'm just adding little dots of that color to each of the bubbles and adding less and less as I move more towards the center. One thing that I'll call out here is you can see that paper towel towards the right of the screen that I'm using to dry and dab my brush. I think I've been using that same like stack of 3 paper towels for the past year or more, and that's why it looks so crazy. Like there's so much color on there. I think there's even some like paint pen on there from previous sketches and drawings that I've done, and it still works. So I keep using it. I imagine maybe it's not best practice, like some of the pigment could be coming off of that onto the clean brush, but it has worked for me. And I also think it looks really cool, um, with all those colors and splotches added. Now I'm going back to adding in a few more of these line type shapes, and I am kind of making this up as I go along, pulling from one of the photos and combining shapes from the 2 different photos together here. But I decided it needed some more of the lines towards the bottom of the image. I didn't want to do just all of the bubble circles at the bottom. Part of the reason I chose these blue teal colors along with the yellow green is because I knew they would kind of mix together without creating a muddy color, but that they would create this nice gradient. If I had used something like a yellowish green and a red, for example, then when they mix in the middle, it's going to get really muddy. But these colors, I think, make a really beautiful gradient as we go. Okay, so next up, I want to add some color pencil shading to make this image pop. And so here I am swatching a number of different colored pencil colors because I wanted to do the shading in a color similar to like a Payne's gray type color. Um, I didn't have a colored pencil that was that color. And so I pulled out the ones that looked as close to what I wanted, as possible. And I'm swatching them here just to see what they look like. but I'm definitely going to have to mix at least two colors together to get to the shade that I am imagining for this sketch. So this gray color here looked pretty close to what I wanted, but not quite dark enough. So now I'm adding some of the dark blue and just kind of seeing how that mixture looks with the green and blue from the painting. And I do like that. I think that's pretty close to a Payne's gray. It's what I was envisioning. Trying like another mix of different colors as well, like this gray um, with one of the more purpley colors here, but I don't like that quite as much as the first mix that I did. So I'm going to go forward with the first mix of the grayish color on the bottom with the dark blue on top. Um, the colored pencils that I'm using here they're actually Crayola colored pencils. I don't use colored pencils very often. Um, I don't know why, I just haven't really used them much. And so I have like a very small set of Prismacolors, but it definitely did not have the colors that I wanted. But I do have a very large set of Crayola colored pencils, and these are like, I think they're the ones that are marketed more towards adults, not so much kids. I guess they're supposed to be slightly higher quality. But this set I got from coworkers a long time ago as a gift, and it has a ton of colors in it. And I think these are actually working pretty nicely here. So I'm going in with this gray color and creating like a shadow underneath each of the shapes and then layering on the dark blue to create the color that I'm looking for. And I really think that these colored pencils make the watercolor pop so much. It kind of is making me want to use colored pencils more frequently with watercolor. I don't know that I've ever used color. Well, there have been a few times when I've used watercolor and colored pencils together, but not a lot. And this is really making me want to try that more in the future because I think it looks really cool and it just adds another dimension and depth to the painting. One thing I will say though is that I kind of wanted these to like blend out a little better, be a little bit smoother on the paper. I don't know if I could get that effect from a different type of colored pencil, or if there's a way to like blend them together better. Maybe like a watercolor pencil would work by kind of mixing them and then adding some water over top to just soften it a bit. I'm not sure. I'm gonna have to play with some different options. But again, like I thought this came out really cool, and I really liked the added depth that this added to the image. So now that I've finished adding the shadow to the line shapes, I'm now going in and adding the same shadow and shading to the bottoms of the bubble circle type shapes. And at this point, like you can definitely see the inspiration of the photos from the car wash in this painting. Um, but I've definitely kind of added my own take to it with the colors. And even the shadows, I think if when I go back and look at the photos that I took, there are actually shadows beneath the shapes, like what I'm adding in here. I'm not sure if they're actually shadows or reflections. It's kind of hard to say. Um, but this shading was definitely inspired by those photos. I just thought that the pattern that it made was so cool. And I'm guessing it was from like whatever squeegee my husband was using to wash the top of the car and like stretch the bubbles into this cool shape. I don't know. I don't really remember exactly how it was formed, but it it looks super interesting and I really like this interpretation. So now, as a final step, I decided that this needed some highlights. And so I'm using my white gel pen to add some highlights to each of these shapes. Now, these highlights were not in the real life, in the photos, but I kind of thought that just adding like a little pop of highlight would make this look a lot more interesting. And I really like the effect. It does make these look more like water droplets as opposed to like s- sets of bubbles. But that's okay. It doesn't, I'm not intending it to look true to life. I'm just trying to make it look interesting. And I'm really liking how these white highlights are looking added to each of these shapes. One of the things I like about creating these pieces that are inspired by, things I've seen in the world, but not necessarily intending to exactly match, a photo that I took or something that I've seen. The nice thing about it is that you have that creative freedom to just kind of like relax. It doesn't have to look perfect because there is no perfect. It's just whatever you want it to look like. And that's what I really enjoy because it's more of like you get into kind of like a meditative state and it's not so much focus on getting everything to be perfectly accurate. It's more about just kind of thinking about what you think would look good. Like what do I think would look good here? How am I gonna make this look better? And then just going forward and seeing what happens. So here I'm now starting to add the highlights to the line shapes. Honestly, I had no idea where to put these. I kind of just made it up, and I think it came out pretty good. I mean, it definitely adds some interest to these areas, and yeah, I think it came out really nice. And now we are finished and pulling off the tape, which again is always one of my favorite parts. You can see all of the white gel pen on the back of my hand, which is what I do when the ink stops running out. I just kind of draw on the back of my hand a little bit to get it to keep coming. And here's the finished piece. I am super happy with this. I really enjoyed painting it. I love how it turned out. It was really fun to experiment with colored pencils along with the watercolor. And I hope you enjoyed painting with me.